Hello, everyone. Today I am joined once again by Gregg Henriques. Greg, apart from being a dear friend and incredible scholar, is here to discuss the shared project that we've been involved with, which is publishing his brand new book. And so, congratulations. And I'm looking forward to talking about this with you and getting into all the details about this. But first, thanks, Greg, for coming back on the podcast to talk about this.
Dude, it's super exciting, and thank you, because it's our joint project. Sky Meadow, the beautiful metamodern spirituality haven and publisher of Sky Meadow, took it on this crazy work, and it's been a joy, and I'm super excited about it. And thank you for your support, and love to be here talking with you about it.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, for some of that context there, last year, 2023, I started Sky Meadow Institute, and a big kind of focus of the Institute is the press, which is aimed at trying to promote and advance big picture thinkers in the complexity space who are bridging spirituality and science, et cetera, et cetera. When I heard Greg was working on something, I was like, oh my gosh, it would be incredible if we could publish some work of Greg's, and all that was able to come together. And the work is UTOK, the Unified Theory of Knowledge, coming out. Well, actually, published. And so again, huge congratulations. So this is now available for people to purchase. Yeah, so it's been quite a wonderful ride working with you on this. And it's an incredible work. It's a wonderful, beautiful artifact, which we'll talk about in a minute, some of the aesthetics. But yeah, maybe just as a first way into this, I think might be helpful for people to know, like, what's different about this book. Like, you've written two
Mhm.
really impressive academic works. I would say your last one, a new synthesis, was really a tome, even a magnum opus that was really quite full and rich, and with copious notes and everything. So to turn around and write another book, I guess, why? What does this one offer that those others didn't, and how is this one?
Totally.
Yeah, what's the mission for this?
Yeah, I'll just back up to because I want to honor you in the process of doing this, in part because I just talked to Layman about Gurdjieff and a Time Between Worlds,
Ah,
and that's coming out on You Talking with Greg, and we had a great podcast, so that will be either out or coming out very shortly. And of course, that was the first book that was published and seeded at a Metamodern Spirituality conference, I believe, in relationship to that. So I love that that's a part of that, and there are seeds and roots and trees that are growing in relation. I actually learned quite a bit. Gurdjieff was not somebody I was afraid of. So anyway, lovely. Well, let's start a little tradition here of publishing
yeah.
of fascinating work, and I'm happy to be in that line here. So there's that. So it's a very different kind of book, the You Talk book. It is much more sort of conversational, declarative, descriptive, without a lot of the normal, at least for me, academic and probably in some ways problematic academic background. Now, I think you need that to have a lot of, to have genuine arguments in a long standing tradition. That's what I did with my other two books, laid them all out in the particular academic fashion. This one is like, get to it, talk about it, cover the ground. So there's that piece that's quite different. The second thing that's different is UTOK itself is a different kind of thing. I actually mentioned this in the acknowledgments in the summary of this, and that is as it evolved from this unified theory of psychology into the unified theory of knowledge, and then came with these sort of archetypal, paradigmatic symbols and symbolons and whatnot, the coin and the garden and a new tree of life and all of that. It's, let's face it, it's odd. And as you know, as I was exploring the evolution of my own place in the world, I found Metamodern to be a particular remarkable synergizing home for what it was, the sensibility was that I was after. And that's another thing I really love about the book, is that actually I think it captures a metamodern, as you folks will see. It's got kind of this alchemical feel to it, and I have to very quickly say that I'm hugely indebted to Christian Gross, the guy who did the graphics on it. He had a sense for what new graphics might be, especially in a metamodern feel that could go into a kind of a traditional alchemical
Mhm.
sense. It's got a lot of natural elements in it for an oral indigenous, and of course I'm in a more modern and postmodern metamodern sensibility. So I'll pause there.
Yeah.
Lots of different possible threads to pick
No,
up,
it's
but
great.
those
Yeah,
are
and I want to dive in a little bit more to that, into the illustrations and the aesthetics of it. And so, Yeah, Christian did an incredible job, but we'll talk more about that in a second. Yeah, I mean, so for me, I think this is great because, as you say, this is not your kind of classic academic work that you've done so well in the past. All that groundwork has been laid, and I feel like this is now a way for people to just get the UTOK download in an accessible, quick, but still deep and really rich way. And so I've heard a number of people mention like, oh, this UTOK stuff sounds super interesting. But I don't really know the best way in, and there's so much going on here, and to try to kind of tie it all together can be, I think, maybe a bit daunting for people. And so I look at this work as sort of like intro to UTOK primer, like just to sort of like, if you want the whole picture, and just to get what that's about, there's finally a work for that. Is kind of how I read this.
Lovely. That's exactly what's after. It's the operating system for UTOK. It's designed, so the design of it's got 30 short chapters in it, pretty quick. That was initially trying to 5 double space Times New Roman 12 space type. That was it. Some of them went a little over, especially with the illustrations, but that was the goal, and to do it in crisp, clear fragments that could be really digested, and then those fragments could be put together like puzzle pieces to create a whole, and then you get the whole map of UTOK for an operating system for this worldview. That's what this is after, and I think it came together reasonably well in that goal.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, so on the aesthetic front and the incredible, again, just sort of visual beauty of this work, talk about that a little bit. Talk about what your vision was for this work, how that came together to be a different kind of work, just at that level.
Yeah, this again really is Christian Gross. He's a behind the scenes guy. Calls it sort of the groundskeeper of the garden. He does the UTOK with Gregg. And a really brilliant visionary guy, but not somebody who's out in front. But he's always looking for different potential angles, and he had shared with me some of an early aesthetic, initially in sort of like a game kind of mode, where we would actually imagine like going off on a testing quest through the land of UTOK, and he had shared some of these kinds of images. And they grew from there. And as I was working on this, he then was like, hey, I'd like to kind of roll out a whole new feel for UTOK that has this more alchemical, traditionalist kind of feel. And the stuff that he produced, I was just blown away with. I loved the intricacy, the specificity. There were a couple actually insights inside of UTOK that I hadn't made, connections that he had made in the drawings. There's a beautiful articulation, and it's on the cover itself in a different kind of flavor of. So the book itself is structured around a mantra. You'll see this on the back cover of the book. It's called Marry, and this is UTOK's. If you had to say what's UTOK in a nutshell, it's marry the coin to the tree in the garden under God. Those are the elements. And it's really, the coin is your subjective experience of the world, or the coin frames that. The tree is the natural science, objective. The garden is the intersubjective cultural collective, and God is our aspirational wisdom. That's what it symbolizes. So fundamentally, UTOK's like, there is an architecture to marry the subject to the objective world in the context of an intersubjective cultural collective that's oriented towards wisdom. That's what that is. Well, he developed a graphic of that I've just fallen in love with. In fact, we're going to print it out, and we're going to frame it. We'll put it up on the wall here. Mossy is going to get here in a little bit, and we're going to have that little ceremony. We're going to put that up on the wall. And really, as an insider, I look at that and I was like, oh my God, this got things in it that I missed. So I look forward to really, sharing that graphic, have other people looking at that graphic, have it come alive for them. And that's just one example of what he poured his heart into. And I'm been super happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think of this as sort of like, well, as we were discussing early on, we were kind of brainstorming a little bit, and Christian was sharing some of his graphics, and I was seeing them for the first time. It really clicked that this could be an opportunity to present this system that you've come up with very much in the tradition or in the lineage, or with at least a nod to kind of that classic, more alchemical kind of almost kind of illuminated manuscript style approach, which for me has always been really meaningful and significant. There's a kind of invitation to, I don't know, get lost in some of the kind of mystical, diagrams and everything. There's a wonderful book out by Taschen, those art books called Alchemy and Mysticism, and it's a wonderful collection of these like great, mandala circles and cosmologies and everything. And I see this as in that tradition, sort of updating that tradition. I have this phrase of metamodern alchemy, which is part of this sort of mythopoetic project of really trying to do that big picture thinking, which is what those old alchemists were doing in many ways, but with the limits of their time and their worldview. And so how do we do new versions of that, updated versions of that? I think of this as sort of the first example, a complete example of something like that. So yeah, I think it's awesome.
That's awesome. And in fact, at the Metamodern Spirituality, I was having a conversation with Scout, leader Wiley. And we were rolling out, Mossy and I were rolling out our theory of the week, which starts with Monday, the Void Darkness Day, which is included in the appendix, then Energy Information Day, Matter Object, Living Organism, today's Mind Animal Day, then Culture Person, and then God Moon Day. And she, given her knowledge of the background and magic, interest in magic and modern alchemical times, she's like, "Oh my God, did you take this from the pagan tradition?" And of course, I'm clueless about pagan tradition. I don't know. I don't know, not directly. She's like, "This is exactly," and showed me some of the connections between godlike figures and old meanings of various days of the week. And I was at that moment just genuinely struck. Yeah, I think I'm really plugged in here to a particular kind of archetype, a particular old paradigm that also is bridging, of course, into the modern scientific worldview. And it is, of course, the metamodern synthesis is this capacity to reach into a wide variety of different sensibilities and recursively reflect on them and coherently integrate them. And so that's what this is after. And this is then speaking to that kind of tradition, which in the modern sense, and certainly the way I grew up, I can't believe I wrote a book like that, right?
Yeah.
I can't believe I'm in a monastery. I got a theory of the week. It's connecting to old alchemical traditions. But I actually think that's unbelievably beautiful, and I feel very alive as I make those connections.
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk about that in a second too, that kind of arc that you've gone through, which I feel like this is representative of or emblematic of. But yeah, you have a chapter in the book about sort of UTOK situated within a metamodern sensibility. And everything you're just saying is so interesting because that move towards the mythopoetic and the symbolic and sort of drawing on the mythos to be able to illuminate these kind of cosmological, ontological, epistemological realities. Such an important move. And also, I think as anyone does that work earnestly and seriously and with depth and care, there are going to be these enduring threads and connections to previous sort of archetypal work that's been done that's sort of like, ooh, that resonates. That has a lineage or a connection back. And, I've often remarked too in other conversations how, we'll have similar ideas that we try to capture symbolically. We might use different symbols or icons for that, but like similar ideas are showing up there in that sense. But also even sometimes we have very similar symbols for things. There's an image in this book that I really love because it's sort of showing the onto to epistemological sort of lens of sort of inside out to outside in, and there's the coin with the layers of the the kind of tree of knowledge structure, but then at the center is this eye that's sort of looking out in a way at itself. And for me, that's a very powerful symbol that again also for me became very potent, but that's not really my invention either. There are these deep archetypal sort of images that kind of emerge here. And so again, it's sort of like both really new and in some ways very idiosyncratic, but on the other hand, it's also very old and very archetypal, very general, very universal.
I'll point to, Alexander Bard, anybody who knows this space knows he talks about his narratology. And he and I synced up on this, that there's basically a pathos subjective narratology. There's a mythos intersubjective and a logos scientific. Certainly that's the way I would frame it. And I think it overlaps with him significantly. I grow up, of course, in the standard scientific. But after I drew out the thing and was working my first 2003 paper, by that time it had already come known to me as the tree of knowledge. Okay, and I was called to call it that in a weird way. I was still totally in the modern paradigm, but I'll just tell you a story that when I first tried to publish that, I almost didn't get my paper accepted because the guy loved the whole argument, hated. I mean, he just with capital A's. I hate the word tree of knowledge. This suggests Henriques is actually, what is he saying about where we need to go and what does it need to happen? And I had to wrestle with the editor. Peter Salovey, actually president of Yale, was the now, or is he still, whatever, historically. That I had to wrestle and basically really justify why the tree of knowledge. And at that time, actually, it was hard in some ways, in the sense that I felt weird about doing that. I am so glad that I did. And the way in which I become glad shows up then in the later parts where it becomes a garden, and then the tree in the garden isn't originally named the tree of life. It's only after I come in contact with the Jewish Kabbalic tree of life and see the circles in it. And I can't believe, I didn't have familiarity with that, but there's huge amounts of archetype. And then I say, okay, and on my tree of life, I've got the tree of knowledge stuck on the first branch. I then learned, wait, the real archetype here is two trees, a vertical tree, a horizontal tree, the tree of life, tree of knowledge. This goes way back to humankind. And so for me, my ideographics, pathos that's finding these kind of narratives, this is embedded in the Western tradition and maybe in the human tradition archetypally and paradigmatically. And then to be connecting this scientifically is super, just so exciting to see these bridges, because I've always sought consilience. That's E.O. Wilson's term, and that's where unified comes from. There's a capacity to unify our knowledge, not reduce them, but to connect them with coherence, to see a jumping together of a big picture. That's what I think UTOK affords. And this book has allowed me to sort of reveal these kinds of bridges in a way that my tradition, as a normal academic, traditional, as that critique suggests, there's a lot of binding against this kind of bridging. But the metamodern sensibility and where I think we need to go is exactly in this direction.
Yeah. So talk more about that, because that arc, that sort of, coming from, as you kind of self-describe it, as a Dawkins-esque kind of, scientific materialism, atheism, reductionism, maybe, and then moving through that into, well, let's just say starting there in a sense, and then being now where you're at in terms of, engaging with archetypes and mythopoeic symbols of, this sort of a thing. There's quite an arc there. And there's also, that's representative too of the kind of book that this is relative to earlier work, which is sort of this move in a way, kind of, I would say, both out of the kind of academic ivory tower, but also carrying that with you, which I think is really important. It's not like this is abandoning science and naturalism or something. It's quite the opposite. It's sort of taking those deep insights, but then moving into a different register. At the same time, it's not, this is not the kind of work that could be published anywhere, right? This is not something that Springer's going to say, oh yeah, great, we'll pick this up, right? And so there's clearly a shift into this new register and a different kind of mode of expression. And I don't know, talk more about that from whatever lens you'd like, either autobiographical or conceptual or whatever, institutional even, totally. What's the significance of that kind of trajectory for you that you've taken?
Well, so I would argue that so I've had a couple of really key break moments in my life. One was the Tree of Knowledge that popped out of my system in 1997. That's a key one. The second is another one's in 2016. That's when I'm at this conference and I built the unified theory, unified approach. And I mentioned this in the acknowledgments. This is still within the modern conventional system of understanding. Okay, so it's weird and it's a big picture view. Can you solve the problem of psychology? Nobody talks that way. It's big. Nobody does meta theory, but you're still talking Skinner and Freud, and I'm doing science and psychotherapy, and we're trying to put all this stuff together, and it's like really interesting. But then I have I'm at this conference cultivating the globally sustainable self. And they're trying to well, how do we do this? And I'm going to walk out of there very frustrated, actually, with the sort of final panel discussion, because essentially it just devolved into abstractions and confusion, and I couldn't get a handle on it. And I said to my friend, I was like, well, we should plant a two of seeds and grow it to a trees. And it was in that moment that all of a sudden the light bulb went, and it was like, it became this visual archetype of seeds and trees. And right at that moment, very quickly thereafter, I came home and started drawing out a tree on this crazy PowerPoint cartoon thing, and then a seed, and then a stone, and then it becomes a garden. And this was the jump. This was a creative jump where, at least in my world, I could see an entire educational system that starts in a kindergarten, right, whereby actually we would envelop our children in a nature system, in a symbol system, in a storied system, and have them unfold that experience then into the propositional scientific understanding and embed that storied, real lived experience in a network that includes science, as opposed to thinking of science as this propositional methods-based notion where we're going to actually get you out of your life so that you can propositionally dictate what is really true and then be disconnected from what is actually happening. With the archetype of the garden, I was like, oh my gosh, we can fuse these things together. We can really bridge our knowledge systems in a much different way. We can be much more participatory and perspectival and procedural, to use some of John's language, with our I didn't have that at the time, but with our propositions. That's what it was after. And once I started down that path of generating a vision of knowledge that is embodied and lived that bridges to the mythopoetic structures, it just became very apparent to me that there's a reason that religion's doing what it's doing. It's just like there's an entire embedded participatory way of living in the world, and we can structure our world with symbolism, with metaphor, with myth, in a way that doesn't make ontological claims that challenge science, but in fact brings a lot of, now my understanding of the ontology of the world to life, and the way we would do it through our archetypal paradigms, as opposed to just trying to reduce stuff to a equation that we then say, oh, that's some pristine truth. So that to me is really where the jump happened. And it's way outside the world. I became increasingly alienated from people in some ways, in the sense that, what are you doing? This is bizarre. I don't talk at all about the garden or the coin. I mention it even in the story that as this emerges, it's so far away from people that it actually creates some distance in my own life with like my program and things along those lines. So it looks very different. It is different. I do believe the 21st century is going to find itself as we go through this into this digital global, where this interface capacity across all of our different informational interface systems is going to get more and more integrated. These vision types of models that go across all sorts of different modalities of experience and participation, they're going to become the way we know. So I do believe it's a future vision. That's when it happened in 2016, and it launched me into this day. And, it grabbed my soul spirit in a particular way. That's just where I was going to go.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you talk about it, because there's a way in which you talk about this unfolding of ideas in an autobiographical sense that seems very much like personal mythology to me, which is a field or a discipline, a topic that I became very interested in for many reasons. And there's different ways actually of talking about the idea of personal mythology. You actually mentioned Dan McAdams in the book as the storytelling ego and that sort of thing. But he also wrote a bit about in a sense, personal myth as being the stories that we tell about our lives and that sort of thing. And there's always been some way that people talking about personal mythology have sort of just sat in kind of the psychology space. I think of like the Krippner and Gene Houston, other people like that. It was sort of like, oh, well, these are the stories that we tell. But I was always interested in it from that, but also another level, which is generating mythos, right? Not just for ourselves, but also for the world, in a sense, right? Of like coming up with myths and stories about reality. But they're also deeply related. And I can relate to your story a lot in this sense, because as someone who is interested in kind of generating collective mythos, there's a way in which that becomes very much a part of your own individual mythos, right? And so the storytelling ego and the storytelling narrative about your own life then becomes about storytelling and mythos in general. And so anyway, as I was thinking about that, and you were talking a minute ago, it reminded me of this thing in a book I'd written called Building the Cathedral. And I don't usually do this, but I want to just read this passage because we are also just talking about sort of convergences and, finding the metamodern sensibility and things coming together in certain ways that just seem like there is a kind of attractor, nature to this. And so there's this passage, and I would have written this sometime around 2015. I wrote, Clearly, what is desperately needed today is an account of the universe that is both in accord with our scientific understanding of it and also psychologically fulfilling. That is, we need a new mythological rendering of the cosmos, one that is right both objectively and subjectively. As ever, this is the task for poets and artists, not scientists, for it must speak to the heart, not just the head. It must be beautiful, not simply correct. As such, it is the endeavor of personal myth making, one of finding a new mythic language for creation. And I go on. Here, the task is not so much the crafting of new symbols, since the subject matter is physical, not metaphysical. What we need rather is a new narrative, a new genesis. And anyway, it's just interesting because that to me became this really profound kind of endeavor, this collective endeavor that seemed like we were in this moment sort of ripe for. And so telling the story of the universe, telling a cosmic tale, and putting that into mythic terms in a way that is also personally myth telling at an autobiographical level. I feel like that's what this book is doing in many ways, and in a shared project that we're both passionate about. So yeah.
What a beautiful quote, and so right, the depth of that parallel and the shared calling is really, it's touching, because that's exactly that's exactly what was unfolding for me. As I think you are more sort of conscious of it. I was more on the scientific side. The fact that I was a clinician working with the subject and knowing and watching people, made me know that you're not going to reduce everything to the third person exterior. And so that was a bridge. But then I back into this whole structure and then wake up, to wait a minute. That what you described is exactly what we need. That wasn't on my forefront, but it's sort of backed in, and then I'm looking out and then experiencing the world. We end the book sort of ends in, like, the jumps that are happening at a particular level point to this, kind of mythic 2028 singularity, and there's a joint point that we can find, and that's a play off me getting stoned. I mean, and then there's this connection between, again, the cultural ethos, the potentialities of ourselves, our individual. Obviously, John and I frame our transcendent naturalism part strong transcendence. The time now is collectively binding ourselves together and waking up, not just to make ourselves subjectively feel better, but to intersectorically transform our connection with reality and the potentials for future, and build some sort of societal cathedral, right? That's appropriate to this time, that anchors us in science, but also orients us towards wisdom. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, so how would you differentiate between a project like, what you're doing, and other folks out there? I would include myself engaged in this sort of shared effort, which I think, we have a sense of there, and what that entails. How would you differentiate that from some of the other things, other versions of this, some of which might be not so good? It might even lead to some pathology, might lead to any number of problems, which, we could get into what they could be. Right. I mean, this has been an ongoing conversation I've been having with you, with Layman, with Vervaeke, others about, artfully scaling, new religious structures, this sort of a thing. So like, if someone hears this arc, they might just say, oh, I guess Gregg's gone off the deep end. He's abandoned science and now he's moving into creating a religion. And I guess all these metamodern people just want to be the new priest gods of society or something. So there's that kind of critique that might show up for people. There's also just, a sense of, oh, I guess, Gregg and these other folks are just giving up on sort of like empiricism and evidence and are just moving into speculation and sort of art or something, right? Which is a little bit less cutting of a critique, but and just generally, right? I think we all are collectively seeing a resurgence of interest in traditional religion and esotericism, occultism, different kinds of like people looking for some kind of reenchantment. And so there's a lot of ways that these kinds of projects could go awry. I guess my question would be, how would you differentiate what you're doing from that? And what are sort of the kind of safeguards in place or ways of thinking that you're approaching this through that sort of mitigate against those problems?
Wonderful. First and foremost, I'll put my scientific chops up against anybody. Period. Okay. And what I will say to you, whoever is saying that, is listen to your system of justification relative to the investment and influence dynamics that your primate person narrator is now engaged in. And I will say that's about as functionally accurate of a scientific explanation of your human behavior that we will have that is coherent. So if you're looking for a naturalistic account, okay, that's empirically grounded both at the first person I observe it and third person scientific, that is actually what UTOK is first and foremost grounded in a way that's quite radically different. So I would argue that there's no other system that's more scientific than UTOK at the level, especially at the level of scientific coherence, that then networks empirical findings, first person and third person together to give rise to a descriptive metaphysical articulation, meaning just a description, really deep description of what the right terms are, like energy, matter, life, mind, culture, and how to interrelate them. So my first point is, if you're like, oh, well, this guy's not scientific, there's nobody more science. That's that. I'll put that down and I'll say that's my claim. And anybody that then is, well, I'm going to go into physics. Well, actually, you're going to make a bunch of philosophical statements. If you're going to say that physics says something about this conversation, show me the empirical data. I haven't found a damn physicist argument about how to explain this conversation ever. I've seen a lot of speculation and judgments about the way in which reductionism works, but that's an argument. That's not data. Okay, these are justification systems, and I have a model scientifically for. So I don't mean to feel defensive, but I just want people to know, if you feel like it gets pulled into some weird alchemy, first point, I'm going to put myself out there as being more scientific than anybody else, period. So then once you do that, then you're like, well, what is a real scientific view open? And that's the beauty of it. A real scientific view opens up the potential to connect to the archetypal paradigmatic mythos and pathos. That's the beauty of the system. So I'm not sacrificing science at all. In fact, I'm recognizing what modern science is blind to and broken around. And by opening it up, it opens up a consilient bridge. At least that's the UTOK experience. So I've never lost my science. I'm a behavioral scientist, a staunch empirical behavioral scientist at heart. I'm also a very critical thinker, and that system's deeply limited and blinded, and it's got its own authoritarian justification systems that make it that way. UTOK overcomes those, opens up, and then finds brotherhood across a wide variety of different domains without ever having to become unmoored from its scientific ground.
Yeah, well said. And it's a beautiful and fascinating not just idea, because I think people in integrative spaces have kind of talked about that as an idea, but I feel like your work is an application of it. It's an instantiation of it, of like, once you move through, you could say transcend and include the scientific modern frame, then you do open up into this sort of transpersonal kind of symbolic and imaginal mythopoetic area in which you can really integrate then the sciences and the humanities, the experience and the data, you could say, in a way that is actually the logical next step. And so, yeah, I think
UTOK's point is, solve the problem of psychology, right? And if you can't do that, then you're going to be in trouble, because your concepts and categories aren't going to work. So the argument fundamentally is that that's tricky. When Abraham Maslow, love him, does, okay, I'm going to do transpersonal and then contribute to that, great. The fact of the matter is Abraham Maslow doesn't have the solution to the problem of psychology. Mm-hmm. And in fact, even nor does Wilbur. The nice thing from our hard science view, if we're going to defend the system, because I don't want to lose that, we're going to defend the system from a science view. Well, the issue is people can't get from biology through psychology to social sciences. No other system does that. That's exactly where UTOK's located. It rotates a set of understandings to allow a vertical and horizontal arrangement of psychology, and it is through that we can maintain grounding in the natural sciences and then blossom into the social sciences and humanities. And that's what UTOK is trying to afford.
So what about the second part of that maybe bad faith critique of, Gregg's just trying to start his own religion or something like that. Greg, he thinks he's a prophet or something. What are sort of responses that you might have to that, and maybe even some kind of structural guardrails of sort of why is this different from other attempts people might have made in the past to present mythos and all that? Yeah.
Well, first off, I'm just a justifying ape. Okay, so let's be clear what I think I am. And I'm going to die. And I'm fallible. And UTOK's a good system for the 21st century. And after that, all bets are off. Okay, so it's not like I'm claiming anything. Here, I'm claiming a set of very clear, you can look at the data, you can make the arguments in relation. And there's an opportunity for us. What I would say is we are justifying apes. and we come with a sociocultural historical justification. So my dad is a great example of this, of what the traditional to modern worldviews live. So I grew up with the Dawkins-esque, there is no capital M meaning. The why? Because we thought there was. I thought Christ really had died for my sins. This is my dad. I'm an evangelical Christian. When I die, I'll be reunited. That's what gives my life meaning. This is sort of a shell game of life that will really, I'll get reunited to the real source of meaning. And then he wakes up and it's like, actually, that doesn't really make sense. And now as it doesn't make sense, it collapses. And then his life then is defined by the contrast of what it meant to be Christ's son, right? And then it's the justificatory contrast to that then is like, okay, I now need to accept my life as not really having meaning, and I'll just sort of construct it. After all, we do have fun. It makes a difference. We're having loving dinners together as opposed to suffering and dying. So I'll work in that direction, okay? But notice the entire system then is pre-framed by an argument, okay? If we say, actually, you are a quasar of complexification, a miracle, whatever the source, you're a quasar of complexification in the night sky. That's what planet Earth is. We don't know anywhere else that is this kind of, if what's beaming off of the universe is complexification, our system is, and you and I as cultured persons are some of the most complexified collections around, and that we're self-aware means we have a miracle of ontic epistemic awareness every time we open our eyes inside the universe. That's generally so. Is this, to me, then, whether it's caused by anything, we go to Bobby Azarian, but whatever the case is, this part of the universe is waking up to its own self. This part of the universe can love and die and feel the fear of that. That's a miracle. And that's a beautiful thing. And that's meaning in life as that expands. And that is sacred. That's sacred in the universe. Okay. There's no, I don't need to, I feel that in my body. I feel that in my bones. I feel that in my cells. And that just opens. So meaning in life is felt. It's everywhere. It's a learning algorithm. Some guy laid it out. I tell you, it's a meaning on top of meaning. It gives rise to sacredness in a particular way of being in the world. And that's available to us. And that's, to me, that both is and ought. That's an is and ought. Quality joint point to pull off of a Persig kind of notion. It's a point of quality here. And that, if you don't have the contrast of the old story, that's as apparent to me. And I believe we can wake up to that. I think it's crucial that we wake up to that. I think we need a collective awakening of what is sacred and what is real meaning in life. And for me, this path is crystal clear. It's like we have to transcend some of the old narratives. We have to understand where they're coming from, rewrite what actually is the script, and wake up to the sacredness of meaning upon meaning.
Yeah, well said. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it's interesting too, because, as you say, like, when your own autobiographical story becomes the breakdown of a justification system, and basically now one's own arc is, oh, I used to think that this was meaningful, capital M, and now I've lost that, and now this, then this becomes a kind of narrative that gets told, but within the pre-given framework. I always thought this about postmodernism is sort of like the postmodern emphasis is always on superficiality, the loss of meaning, the loss of value, the deferral of meaning, nihilism, all this stuff, right? But it's always like in reference to what people used to think was meaningful. And if you posit the default of meaning as some supernatural or metaphysical or absolutistic or transcendental this, then you lose that. Then you're just faced with the void and negation. But that's all privileging that metaphysical set of presuppositions in order to even make that case. So to go postmodern means you've actually got to situate that as a reaction and then kind of chart a new course with better foundations. And I feel like that's kind of what we're getting at, and what this book helps map and talk about.
Totally.
Yeah. Another question on that front too, though, is sort of like, so this is your system. This is something you've written, and at the same time, you're working in a community. I mean, this was also a joint effort with Christian and a whole group of the UTOK, circle and other people as part of all this. So there's some element of which, yes, it is all you, but also it's bigger than you. But like, in the sense of, if people look at this and they're like, oh, do I have to, take this in hook, line, and sinker? Is this a whole system that, like, you've got to, take it in like some Scientology thing or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, so maybe just talk a little bit about how people should read this and what sort of,
Yeah. So, right, I'm not a fundamentalist. I'm not a foundationalist. Okay, I'm a scientist. All right. A lot of this, and it will take a little while. This has my signature on it. I am a lone wolf theorist. I did basically build all of this at one level. There's an aspect of it. The vast majority is just me building it by myself. So that's weird. And then it's got my own aesthetic to it. Okay. So, and crucially, that can, for this to have real value, that's got to be taken out and still have a lot left. And I believe that that's the case. I believe there's an enormous amount left. You can take out the aesthetic. One of the reasons I'm really excited about this is that it shows a new aesthetic of the system. I'll show you. We haven't gone through it yet. I built a thing called the First Law of UTOK, and it's got a slightly different aesthetic, a more futuristic, scientific, science fiction kind of aesthetic to it. And so we can go in. I believe that UTOK it's going to afford itself to have all sorts of different aesthetic sensibilities, all sorts of different play. I'm super clear that these icons, okay, are that, and they're not idols, okay. So to stick the all-seeing eye as God, transcending back to is puts it in a particular place. There are aspects of architecture here that I think cut across a wide variety of different domains. I do think energy, matter, life, mind, culture as the natural wave of behavioral complexification. I stand by that scientifically. I stand by the argument that there is a subjective epistemic portal for each of us that we then build intersubjective systems of justification, and science is a unique one that allows us more objectivity than we've achieved in the past. And we need systems that somehow coordinate between those three vectors to give us a transjective onto epistemology. That's the most sophisticated knowledge systems I think that we can build. That's what I would say is pretty generalizable, at least about the kind of the academic claims. The flavor of them, the sort of mythopoetic stuff, I mean, at one level, they're totally up for, oh, Gregg does have a weird flavor. And at the same time, I do embed them in things like gardens, trees of life, trees of knowledge that have a pretty rich and broad history. And there'd be then lots of different ways in which you could blend into that aesthetic, at least in terms of sort of a Western kind of tradition. So it is contextualized. It's contextualized in a rich cultural tradition. At the same time, it's not foundationalist or fundamentalist, and it does have a signature aesthetic from me, but it also has enormous algorithmic, analytic types of things that could abstract and generalize.
Yeah. Awesome. What would you say, what would be a way that would, like, if you saw someone making use of this book in a particular way, it would make you very happy? Like, what's sort of the ideal way that someone picks this up and something meaningful occurs from that? What does that look like for that person?
Totally. So for me, I think that basically what I would love to see happen is people to sort of wake up to a new worldview, a new set of fact value intersections. When people start to really internalize the days of the week, I'll return to that as a way of saying, hey, I now see the world as void and energy information, and feel the cycle of that and feel the layers of that. I see myself as both a cultured person and a minded primate that's also a living organism, a material object on an energy information field. I would love, at a fact level, I'd love to have that be, part of the real kind of take-home message. And then there's the other part that's much more dear to my sort of humanistic heart, and watch so many people suffer as they get trapped by the frustrations of life and the injuries. And we talk about bumps and bruises, and then they form loops, and they don't understand the nature of those loops, so they're transparent to them rather than opaque. So opaque means I can shift from a meta perspective and see myself doing this, but when there's transparent, you're just in it, so your consciousness is just subjectively reacting. And of course, as a clinician, what I see over and over is people grab the world, reciprocally narrow, to use John's term, and see the world, insist upon it on this way, and then suffer and get so frustrated by that. So the humanistic side and the therapeutic side also comes with a whole map for how we get trapped. Actually, the book introduces something we haven't talked much about, which is the dragon's lair, the mythopoetic source of neurotic misery, which I say with enormous amount of respect. Okay, I know a lot of people that lived in this. I can certainly flavor, like, what does it look like when you're in that place? But how do we hold it? And this gives an archetype for that. It gives you an idea. And of course, the ComMemo flashlight provides a frame. So when I'm talking about what do I hope people take away from, there's these two broad, there's a big worldview picture that gives us this justifying persons and minded primates on the one hand, and then there's this other thing about, hey, how do we really get trapped and engage in, painful neurotic suffering that we can reverse and afford ourselves reciprocal opening and growth even as the world bumps and bruises us.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like there's a conceptual level here, but also a praxis level. And maybe that's a good setup to talk about the days of the week and the credo and things like that. You've been living in your own kind of UTOK monastery, as you call it, right? Like this does, again, move really, it opens up a new way of relating to this new worldview and this new way of understanding reality in a manner that becomes embodied, ritualized, and there's a kind of way that this now can potentially structure your life. I know that that's become very salient and meaningful for you. So, yeah, talk a little bit about that angle.
Yeah. So I mentioned a little bit that there was some alienation, and ultimately, and folks know this. The book is dedicated to my life partner, Masya Graya, we. Over the last 2 years, we fall in love and formed a partnership. That emerged because she got in contact with UTOK, and for whatever reason, her system was just ready to absorb it. And I don't really, it's kind of fascinating to watch somebody who just sort of intuitively speaks the language. Of course, the iQuad coin, and actually she helped me very early on, say, you should depict it this way. And everyone else like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, depict it this way. And I'm like, oh my God. That's right. That's a better way than I've been doing it. So anyway, I hooked up with somebody and formed a partnership with somebody. And we talk about this in the book. I dedicated to her. But so then we started living our lives according to UTOK. I mean, and what did that mean? Well, one of the things was this day of the week that makes it very real every day. I know when it's mind animal day. I then thinking about psychology. I'm thinking about toggle between self and awareness as a way. So that's the kind of Western concern about the self, Eastern concern about fundamental awareness gives a frame there. And we also then built this, our monastery. This was sort of where we lived. We were going to kind of hold this. We had little rituals of putting pictures up every week and then honoring them, and then built this credo. So that has beliefs, values, and mantras. I won't go through them all, but the first belief is I believe in the garden fractal. Okay. That's the first belief. And what does that mean? Well, for anybody that's been in the space, okay, and I went through this a little bit, part of the space is, oh my gosh, society's not doing that great, right? There's a lot of high risk stuff. There's a meta crisis, however you want to name it. We're certainly not maximizing our wisdom relative to our potential. We'll put it that way. And the potential for pandemics, World War III, breakdown of our digital global network into real catastrophe feels real to me. I use the analogy, we're on a biplane heading into a hurricane. UTOK's part of a map. That scared me. Okay, I had to go through about a 6-month period of like, okay, what does that mean if I feel like, how do I get in right relation? Well, the I believe in the garden fractal means, okay, I'm going to be aware of as large of expansion as possible and see patterns and not deny. And at the same time, I will control. It's kind of like the serenity prayer, which I would often use, which is basically grant me the capacity to know what I can control, know what I can, and do the best that I can. The garden fractal is this idea to be aware of it and be committed to wisdom within what you can control. And that's just one sort of example of what sort of came alive. And so every morning, Masi and I, we go through, we pull up a belief, we pull up a value, we pull up a mantra that guides the day. That's how some of the ways which has become alive. It's got a value-based system, the ultimate justification, be that which enhances dignity and well-being integrity, a whole network for how we can all kind of come together and maximize our valued states of being in a way that I think is quite different than we're currently doing.
Yeah. It occurs to me that so the T in UTOK is for theory, the unified theory of knowledge, but with this book and listening to you talk about all this and knowing you for some time and how much this whole way of seeing has really impacted your way of being in the world and directed your, again, kind of your life story and all that way. It seems like it's also at least possibly so much more than a theory. Like, what is UTOK for you? Is it a theory? Is there some other term? Is it a religion? Is it a worldview? Yeah. Is it a way of being? What's the category to put in?
Sure. It's a religio. It binds my fact value system together. Obviously it's not a supernatural religion. but it certainly has become a binding of what it is that and it's an invitation to bind others on what is and ought to be. In fact, another way we frame it is often clarify what is, cultivate what ought to be, and bind those together. Okay, so and it is the unified theory of knowledge comes off the unified theory of psychology. Okay, to do what? For psychotherapy, for the embodied subjective living that I am sitting there across from people know the story, but I'm sitting there across from people like, who am I and what am I using to guide, my engagement with this person toward wise living or away from sin and foolishness? Like, what justifies that? And the unified theory is there's a scientific argument. I do need to know what is. But it's also nested then ultimately in the orientation toward wisdom. That's why I often talk about wisdom-oriented men's knowledge or women's knowledge, wisdom-oriented modern empirical natural science. So fundamentally, when you start thinking about justifications, this is another thing that the inside of justifications, you realize justification systems fuse facts and values, and they need to because they sit on investment systems which fuse facts and values in relationship to, as the animal systems have to decide both what is and what ought to be if you're going to actually invest in the world. That's a fusion of facts and values. So this is definitely a theory to foster practice. It's a theory application. It affords research and understanding and ways of living that are grounded in values. So worldview, a religio that kind of binds individuals together, orients towards the potential of the sacred, and gives us a new way of thinking about what is and ought to be.
Yeah. What would you make of, there's a lot of people out there, right now with a kind of urgency around this issue of sort of finding religio. That seems to be a huge topic on people's minds. There's a lot of conversions to traditional religions. There's a lot of kind of resurgence of interest and engagement with kind of more axial age traditional religion. So it seems like there's a lot of people out there. And of course, demographically, there's a lot of focus or talk about, talking about men. It seems like disproportionately young men seeking, orientation, meaning, wisdom, purpose. And it does seem like in response or in reaction to a lot of the failures of the ideologies at hand, people are largely, it seems, forced to kind of turn back to traditional religions. And I guess just what are your thoughts on that phenomenon in general? Where does UTOK fit in that, in this moment, around that? Is there, and then I guess related to that is, I don't also want to just paint that with a broad brush and say, oh, it's all just some kind of, turn to old things, right? There's also, I think, really deeply a desire for people to feel rooted in something old, traditional, with deep past, deep lineage, and a lot of currency in that sense that can add an aspect of identity, right? That I think people are also very hungry for. And so related to this question would be, how does UTOK relate to that? On the one hand, it's a very novel, very new kind of thing. So situate this project, this book, and UTOK in general within this kind of cultural moment and this sort of fraught relationship with religion.
Totally. Well, I mean, I really think we're in the time between worlds, to use the exact sign frame. I borrow from that within the book and put it there, and it fits within the whole fifth joint point. I think there's a sense in which, we're in the modernity's done its thing. It's got a postmodern critique, which is also fading. And now what is our justification system as we come across the high horizon of the digital? There's an enormous amount of flux, of fear that's going to root people to say, wait a minute, is a lot of wisdom in these old conservative ideas, subset of individuals. And whether that's ontological or eschatological or axiological, I mean, there's lots of different ways in which you could find, I think, meaning. I think you can look at our current society and be like, listen, something's wrong or we're missing some key elements, okay? Like, we don't really know what we're doing here. We're not grounded. To me, what UTOK affords is wonderfully summarized in a metamodern kind of frame, which is that it recursively steps back and then includes and transcends. And what UTOK does is it then brings a particular set of analytics, the problem of psychology, that says, well, this is one of the real reasons we've had a meaning crisis, is that we haven't actually been able to build a system of understanding our natures as we grow into our civilized technologies in relationship to nature itself and each other, we don't know. We have all of this knowledge about the biological and the physical sciences, but they don't really bridge and give us meaning. We have knowledge sort of in the social sciences, but that's a hard knowledge. And so there's really this confusing network of fragmentation and then in a flood of information overload that then is swamping us and causing all sorts of difficulties to be grounded in what is real and have a cumulative sense of contact with reality. UTOK fundamentally is about that. It is about addressing that. It says there is actually a way to deal with this, to create a structure of understanding and architecture that cumulatively pulls the subjective, objective, intersubjective together in a transjective and does so in a way that makes grounding sense and common sense and deep ideas. The challenge of it is that this is overwhelming worldview. It's like my parents, brothers have been watching me do this for a long time. They love me. They still don't know what the hell I'm talking about half the time. It's like these weird archetypal symbols. And I don't know how to. That's a great question. I think for UTOK and for its future, it's been enormous. I just feel so grateful that Mossy and I were able to come together and actually live it with two people that really speak it, have a small community of people that are really starting to see, wait a minute, there's a lot of resonance here. Somehow that's got to be metabolized and then transitioned into the zone of proximal development where a lot of people are. I hope that happens. I'm anxious to see how that happens. I'd like to contribute to that. Of course, I'm so far in it that I'm not really the best person necessarily to do that.
Well, no, I think that is a big question for UTOK, but also, again, other people doing similar things operating in this space where I think we share the sense of what you just described very, eloquently, of the kind of breakdown that we're facing, the kind of overload, and then what do we do about that seems to be one clear answer is, well, we need to find more successful adaptive systems for understanding reality and orienting wisely to reality. And we currently lack that even with regard to the traditional religions because of the loss of kind of the connection between their cosmologies and other kinds of ways of seeing the world and now what we know to be the case. So we're stuck with sort of a new understanding of the universe, and yet we don't have a sort of mythic structure that can kind of home us in that universe. And so at the same time, you've got people trying to do that work, but then other people will come around and be like, but this is all newfangled and new symbols and stuff, and I want the old stuff. It's like, all right, well, and so there's an inherent tension and challenge there. But on the one hand, though, there's also this sort of, I think, very legitimate question of, well, if this only stays in the space of symbol and an image and clarifying ideas about reality, great. But that's a very different thing from someone being like, hey, the Son of God died for your sins and ... right? There is a kind of emotional charge that a lot of the traditional religions have as part of their narratives that click for people. And there's something there, not just in the stories, but in the ethos and in the archetypes that feels like a very satisfying gestalt for people. And so I'm seeing that more and more. People are finding, this really speaks to me. And so I feel like if we are going to be successful in doing that thing I was just talking about, that you were just talking about, it's also got to work at that level. And then the question is, right, like, does a tree of life of complexity cones and does an elephant sun god, does that work at that level? And I guess that's an open question.
Yeah, I think it is an open question. I will say for me, I guess I just summarize it: a sacred appreciation of the miracle of my ontic epistemic awareness. That I think is available through a very analytic or whatever lens. It's also available through a spiritual lens. And of course, this has been, many wisdom traditions will speak to this at various levels. But the availability for us to appreciate our place in awareness complexification and what that means, to allow ourselves to feel the meaning of that across our stack, to me, that's sort of the most generalizable thing. I mean, my friend Rob Scott basically, had his own enlightenment moment, talks about a fundamental shift, essentially connecting with the isness of the world, transcending the justificatory structures, not in a way that that you let go of them completely, but grounding yourself in a particular kind of way of making contact with reality. John will often talk about this way in which reality discloses it when the conforming grip affords itself. For me, and the sacred aliveness, the people who bring religious terminology to that, to me, that's what we got to point people to, because I think the right framing of consciousness in the natural world oriented toward particular kinds of values brings the system alive. And then you point that as meaning versus the death, alienation, and discouragement. And that's what's sacred. And we're in a position to cultivate that in a radically different way. And I think that's for folks that are, obviously, there's an enormous comfort in and even an argument. You can talk to Jordan Hall or whatever. You can get an argument as well as comfort. The idea of a loving God who died for your sins and is resurrected, and you can be resurrected and hang with your ancestors in a particular way. I don't offer that. I'm an agnostic in relation. I will say this. UTOK's endo-natural, okay, and that's like I'm going to forego the supernatural questions. I'll be agnostic. I'll be skeptical, but whatever. We can do a lot better in the natural world itself. We can conform our human ways of being in the world to the scientific understanding in a way that affords a connected disclosure of reality that makes us come alive and makes us appreciate meaning in the world and sacredness in and of itself. And that's really then secondary. I think we need that regardless of whether God's watching us or not. I think he'd be happy if that were what we were choosing to do. And if this is our only life, that's a good idea to do it that way anyway. So I think that's one way to frame it.
Well, and it's interesting too, because it might also be a bit of a category error or a kind of misplaced question or critique, because, it's the same sort of thing with the alchemists. If you go back, right? Like, some folks were doing some very significant, meaningful things for them at the mythopoetic level, making sense of reality. And it probably would have been pretty difficult to just in a quick elevator pitch describe the significance of the work of the opus and the negredo phase and the turning of this into the putrefaction. It's like, what? And so if we can value that and look at that and be like, wow, people were doing some really deep archetypal stuff here that had some profound significance to it, that we're still finding ways of connecting and integrating with other aspects of reality in various ways, which isn't to say oh, they had all the answers. I'm not saying that,
right?
But there was a system there that was not immediately transparent or clear to your average man on the street, and that's not a knock against it, right? There's always going to be some of that esoteric, exoteric kinds of distinctions. And similarly, even within the great traditions, an Aquinas is going to have different things on his mind and talking about different things than, just your standard person in the pew on Sunday or something, right? So it is a demographic audience kind of question as well.
And so I'll just, to me, what you're doing there, and this is what I was missing, is you're pointing to the power of the process, meaning, and whatever the content is, but the power of the process. So what UTOK led us to do is like, our home became a sanctuary, it became a monastery, it became, there were places and rituals we engaged in that were sort of sacred, and then we built a belief value mantra statement that we sort of hold ourselves to. That's what emerged. And I look back, and I had a great family, and I was very appreciative of what I got, in a standard, but sacredness, not. It was just embedded in the love and that we would share, but there wasn't a holding of what it is that really matters in the world, and what do you really believe, and why do you commit to that particular thing. We certainly valued integrity. My dad was very honest and instilled in that. I deeply appreciate, but why? Why? I would argue that actually, for me at least, the UTOK structure embeds integrity and dignity and well-being. It embeds the entire sort of spectrum of value in a way that's ontologically real and has meaning, rather than just some sort of construction that's good for us because we'd rather be happy than not, even though it's meaningless. That's a very different opinion or frame. And I think that UTOK can give that kind of frame. I think a lot of the things that we're, kind of groping toward here in the metamodern space are about that.
Well, let's maybe move to a close on that topic, because that's sort of a version of my last question, which is something like, again, I was talking to Rafe Kelly not long ago, and he was saying that someone had said to him, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. And he was like, it just became like an earworm. It just stuck with him. It was meaningful, and he had to like unpack that. He had to live into that, etc. There's a kind of story there that people can connect with almost intuitively and then live into. And I guess the question for you would be like, what is that story? Or maybe it doesn't have to be a story, but what is that for UTOK, specifically around this issue of the sacred? Like, how would you kind of summarize, not necessarily using the terms or the symbols or the images or even the mantras that you've come up with, but just like in layman's terms, like what is this orienting us to? What is, when someone wakes up and they say, does my life have meaning? What am I doing? Why am I here? How does UTOK answer that question in a way that you could succinctly describe?
Totally. Yeah, so I think that it's an appreciation, and this is hard because you're surrounded by people and it's every day. First off, it's appreciation of the miracle of your complexification is one of the things. Okay, and then it's the contact that complexified integration affords. So when I talk about marry the coin to the tree, that is me seeing myself as a cultured person, minded animal, living organism, material object in an energy information field. Okay, what that affords me is this a deep sense of oneness with everything in the universe. It's all an unfolding energy information, and yet it still also affords me a tremendous sense of unique individual differentiation and a deep love of my own perspective in this world, and then a deep connection to other. So it's a one-many. In fact, the design of the coin is a one-many dialectic, at least in part. And to connect to that thread, connect to a coherent integrated thread that both appreciates my uniqueness and then links me up to this whole field in a particular way that is the miracle of existence. I believe that that's really available to us. I believe that kids can celebrate in that if we were raised in a particular way. I wasn't, not to knock on my parents, but I wasn't. As I got in touch with it, I tell a story sometimes. One time I was overwhelmed just walking into Food Lion. I just started crying, basically, because I was like, I can't believe I'm alive. I can't believe that my system can do this. I think that there is a real opportunity for us to reclaim the sacred of existence, the sacredness of consciousness, of awareness. That what UTOK tries to do with this entire architecture is like, we can connect our subjectivity to science and to culture and to value. That's marry the coin to the tree in the garden. And if you do, the difference in meaning is enormous relative to, well, what's available. I mean, we're going through, maybe it's tapering, but our United States just went through an opioid crisis where we had, almost 100,000 people dead a year because they're shooting themselves up with drugs, getting alienated from the world in a particular way. There is an opportunity for us to connect. And I think our systems, once we know how to calibrate them, are eager to fill the metabolizing capacity of that connection. So UTOK tries to point to that. And if that happens, man, the difference between that and the malnourishment and the disconfigured alienation is just tremendous. So that's what UTOK points to. So that's marry the coin to the tree in the garden under God.
Well said. Well, speaking of which, what is that you've got jangling there? I've been hearing. Is that a?
These are my coins.
Yeah,
these are coins. So there it is. Yep. There's the iQuad coin with the tree of life on the back. So I have two of them. I've been banging them together. So sometimes I try to do that.
Awesome. I will just say on that final note, it's interesting to me because I resonate very much with that. And as I've been exploring your work in this general domain of ideas around meaning and value and actually putting that back into the world as being something real, that has utterly changed the way that I live and feel about my existence and about being alive and relating to other people. But what occurs to me as well, though, is that something like a religio or religion might also fulfill different functions for some people. For me, it's always been deeply about meaning. And so when I feel fulfilled at the meaning level, I feel like, well, there it is. This does it. And then other people might be like, well, but for me, a big part of it is like my connection to my ancestors, or, feeling that I don't know, certain kinds of peak experiences if I do a certain kind of ritual or something. And so these are broad categories that, maybe it just occurs to me that, that for people seeking different aspects of the religious life, getting the meaning thing met might not be as salient as other aspects, and so maybe these different kinds of approaches won't speak to them as much. But I will say, for my part, the kinds of things that you're describing and the way that you're doing it is very core to that kind of reinfusion of meaning and significance and the reenchantment of life, not by turning to some other supernatural two worlds mythology as the bestowal of meaning, but rather to see the meaning as a inherent, immanent, emergent aspect of reality itself at every kind of layer down the stack. And that to me is very profound. And when I think about Religio, that I feel like, fits the bill. So anyway, very proud and honored and humbled to have had a chance of the Institute and this press to publish this book. Any other final thoughts you'd want to throw out there about this?
Just a deep sense of gratitude to you in particular in terms of bringing this book around, but to you to framing the Metamodern. Deep sense of gratitude, Masya Gralia, Christian Gross, the people in this corner of the internet, John Vervaeke, Rob Scott. I mean, I've been able to connect with individuals, and so that brings you alive, that interconnection, and to feel a part of something that I didn't even know existed, to have my sort of soul spirit be pulled into it. That's really the Metamodern kind of thing was really striking to me. So it's beautiful, and I'm just not sure where else I would have put this, and so it's just a perfect home for it. So I'm really happy that it worked out that way, and you're a dear friend, and I'm glad we were able to put this out together.
Thanks, man. Yes, it will be literally at home here on the increasing bookshelf of Sky Meadow Press works, including Layman's, including one that I put out, now this, and then we've got at least one more being published this year, and we've already got some lined up for next year. And so it's an expanding kind of wisdom library, and I think it's beautiful to have this as sort of integral to that set. So thank you, Gregg, for writing this book, for this conversation, and for all the work that you're doing. Greatly appreciated. And there will obviously be a link for people who want to explore this and check this book out. But for now,
right. And unlike these, it's $19.99. This is instead of $150.
Right. Yeah, that's right. This is full color, folks, for $19.99 or whatever it is. So yeah, it's yeah. So check it out. It's an incredible work, and much appreciated, Gregg. Till next time.
Thank you, friend. Deeply appreciate it.